All right, we're gonna get started. I want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming out today. We're really trying to open up and invite people in more capacity and increasing capacity. And as some of you have witnessed, that comes with its little bumps as we work out how we do these things and invite as many people as we can into the space. And we're going to start today's program with the Tar Baby story as told by one of our wonderful Renaissance Ramblers, Josie Bailey. And she has requested that you please silence your phones so that she won't be interrupted. She's got a flow going. I've seen her do it, and it's fun, and I don't want anyone to get distracted from the fun that she's about to bring. And then we'll go into something a little more meaty and substantive with Ra Malika, who's going to be sharing some theories and thoughts and, on all kinds of interesting things around the tar baby and feminism and folkloric traditions and, all that kind of stuff. So welcome. If anyone ever feels like giving a micro donation, we've got a little thing here, but we are so glad to have you. And then after we finish with Ra Malika, we'll have some Q&A, and there's some light tea and coffee and hot chocolate and cookies available in the lobby. We invite you to wander around and have a look and ask questions. Most of us are branded up today. We've been working on that too, so you know who works here. And if you see them with a Renaissance item on today, they work here in some capacity. We also got one of our other storytellers, Cheddar. He's one of our other Renaissance Ramblers, and we're blessed to have Miss Wren over in the corner as well. We got 3 of them, which is a wealth of information, history, and fun. So that's enough for me.
Welcome to the Brer Patch. Well, the story that I'm going to share with you is the Tar Baby. It is by far one of the most famous of the Joel Chandler Harris stories. And I have a volunteer that's already volunteered. So, Mr. Cheddar, would you please come and help me tell the story? Give him a hand. Volunteer, voluntold, what's the difference? Long time ago, all the animals lived in the forest. They did everything just like us. They lived in houses just like us. They wore clothes just like us. They cooked their food just like us. They even fussed and fought just like us. Now, of all the animals in the forest, there's Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, Brer Coon, Sister Elephant, Sister Cow, Sister Rhinoceros. All the animals lived in the forest. But there were 2 animals always playing tricks on each other, Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. Every morning when Brer Rabbit woke up, the first thing on his mind was how he could trick Brer Fox out of some of his good food. Every night when Brer Fox went to bed, the last thing on his mind was how he could have Brer Rabbit over for dinner. Now, he didn't exactly want him to come over and sit down with him at the table and have dinner. He wanted to have him on the table to eat him up for dinner. So, Brer Fox came up with this brilliant plan. He knew that Brer Rabbit loved, and when I say loved, I mean he loved pretty women. So Brer Fox came up with this idea to take a big batch of tar, shape it in the form of a person, put a head on it, give it some ears, eyes and nose, shoulders, arms, legs, and feet, sat it in a chair on the side of the road. Now, so Brer Fox decided to dress the tar baby first done. You know what, put that first on, give you some glasses. Let's see, I think your earrings are nice.
Good. Oh. Oh, wow. Just in shade.
Yeah, that's what I call beauty. Okay, so Brer Fox decides to hide behind a tree and wait for Brer Rabbit to come down the road. Well, he didn't have to wait very long because before long, Brer Rabbit was coming down the road. Now, I have to tell you something about Brer Rabbit. He had the most beautiful singing voice of any animal in the whole forest. He was the lead singer of the animal gospel choir. He was coming down the road and he was singing, "Somewhere the rain falls, dead dogs die. Somewhere the rainbow, there's a girl for I." If you want that record, see me. So Rabbit comes and he stops and he looks and he says, "Oh, my dream come true. A beautiful, gorgeous woman." So Rabbit goes over and he says, "Good morning to you, darling." But the turtle, he don't say nothing. So he goes over to the other side and he says, "You're looking mighty fine this morning, darling. Can I have your cell phone number? so I can call you up and we go out on a date." But the toy baby don't say nothing. So I goes to the other side and he says, "Now look here, honey. You is fine. But you ain't all that. Good morning to you, pretty girl." But the toy baby don't say nothing. And the lady says, "Well, didn't your parents teach you no manners? Because, honey, if your parents didn't teach you no manners, I'm going to teach you some manners." And Brer Rabbit balls up his fist, hits that toy baby upside the head, and he goes, "What?" And when he did that, what do you think happened? He got stopped. And Brer Rabbit says, "Turn me loose. You turn me loose. If you don't turn me loose, I'll hit you with my other hand." What? Hits him with the other hand, what happened? Yeah. "If you don't turn me loose, I'll hit you with my right foot." What? Hits him with his right foot, and what happened? You don't know who you messing with. "If you don't turn me loose, I'll kick you with my other foot." What? Kicked him with his other foot, and it. So, "You're about to make me plenty mad. If you don't turn me loose, I'll whop you with my head." What? Hit the toy baby with his head, and what happened? Now, this is the picture you gotta keep in your mind. Because this is the way poor Brer Rabbit was all stuck up on the toilet. Just about that time, Brer Fox, who'd been hiding behind the tree, comes out, looks at poor Brer Rabbit all stuck up on that toy baby, and he goes, "Brer Rabbit, looks like you're a bit stuck on yourself." "Guess you know what I'm having for dinner tonight. Barbecue rabbit." Now this wasn't so funny to Brer Rabbit, because the last thing he ever wanted to be anybody's dinner, especially not for Foxy. So Brer Rabbit says, You got me, Brer Fox. How much lemon juice and honey you put in your barbecue sauce?" Brer Fox says, "Don't you worry about that, because you gonna be my dinner tonight." And Brer Rabbit says, "Do anything you want to do to me. Cut off my fingers, pull out my toes, I don't care, do anything. And Brer Fox thought, but he says, but please, whatever you do, just don't throw me in that brown patch over yonder with all those sticky briars sticking in you like pins and needles. Please don't throw me in that brown patch. Now, Brer Fox had to think about this because he wanted this rabbit to have the worst possible death you could imagine. So Brer Fox thought, I'll do the one thing this rabbit don't want me to do. So Brer Fox goes over to the toy baby, grabs Brer Rabbit up off that toy baby, twirls him around a time or two, and whoop, threw Brer Rabbit right smack in the middle of the brown patch. And just about the time Brer Fox was about to do his victory dance, because he had finally gotten rid of that good-for-nothing rabbit once and for all, he thought, duh. I just threw away my dinner. Well, it don't matter. At least that rabbit won't be playing tricks on nobody else. Just about that time, he heard something go. What do you think that was? Rabbit, and all of a sudden the loudest laughter you could ever make. I told you again, Brer Fox. Told you again, I was born and raised in the briar patch. Born and raised in the briar patch. Rabbit jumped up and ran off down the road. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm really excited to be with y'all today. My name is Ra Malika Imhotep. I am, where do I begin? My day job is that I'm an assistant professor of global African diaspora studies just up the road at Spelman College. I was born and bred in the Briar Patch, West Atlanta, Vine City. My father, Akbar Imhotep, whose presence underwrites everything I'm about to say, who introduced me to the Wren's Nest, to the Brer Rabbit stories. He passed in December of 2022. And I'm kind of jumping around here, but it feels important to say at the beginning that, grief is really hard. And in the beginnings of my mourning process, it was like a really curled inward internal process. And I had the blessing of having a mentor during the time who encouraged me to allow my experience of grief to transform the academic and intellectual work I was doing. And from that place, this project, the Tar Baby Principle, blossomed out of my dissertation. So my dissertation, which was about Black feminine figures and creative performance and labor, like what are the ways that Black women and femmes utilize different kinds of creative practice to play with what we think we know about Black women's labor. A chapter in there was about my work rewriting and performing the Tar Baby tale. And there's an image from that here. And next to me, kind of my double here, is the Tar Baby figure in the basement that I'm hoping to encourage the Wren's Nest to bring back out with the work of proper contextualization. These...
We'll talk about it.
Right. These figures, these icons are controversial, and I don't want to belittle that. I'm also gonna move up here. This is Miss Chloe Henderson. I don't think she's gonna stand. Oh, wow. Wow. That's what she wanted to be. She didn't want to be on the mantle. And I'll talk more about her. And I also want to direct your attention to this bookcase on this side. In this right window, there's a book that says The Chronicles of Aunt Minerva Ann. And that's a lesser known figure of the Joel Chandler Harris oeuvre, who I will be talking about as well. So I want to thank Rebecca and Jim and Paige for continuing to steward my reconnection here with the Wren's Nest. It's truly legacy work, and I feel really honored and blessed to get to be here and reimagine these stories, these tales, reimagine my life as an intellectual, and also reimagine the work of my father. So this is an image of a quote of a quilt that my father made in the last year of his life. It depicts, and I'll come back from my notes. So in this quilt, as I see it, as my father would discuss in our kind of personal family lore about the Crystal River, which marked the transition between life and death, I looked at this one day and I finally got it. I said, oh, my father and our other dead and loved ones, ancestors, are that tree. And those we could imagine sitting to gossip underneath it. Whereas me and my kin, my nibblings, my nieces, nephews, all of that are the petals in the heart of the sunflower on the other side. This quilt is the centerpiece of an exhibit, a traveling exhibit that's in the pink room, called Across the Crystal River, Akbar Imhotep and the Craft of Remembrance. And if you haven't yet, I highly encourage you to spend some time with it. It features 12 of these Black history puppets representing different figures from Black life and culture. Everybody from Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, etc. And it really shows the way, you know, my dad, I was talking to Cheddar and Miss Gwen earlier about how he walked in these doors soon after they were desegregated in the mid to late 1980s. And at that time, what he was doing, this like turn towards folklore in the midst of a kind of Black cultural nationalist reimagining of what Black culture was controversial. But when we look at these puppets that he made in the 90s, we can kind of see proof of the fact that he was bringing this like Black revolutionary political consciousness in conversation with folk arts and crafts, like the stories, like the puppets. So that's my plug, and also me lifting up the craft of my father. And this is another picture of the quilt. So I start with the recognition that we are at war. And that war is not simply a hot debate between the capitalist camp and the socialist camp over which economic, political, social arrangement will have hegemony in the world. It's not just the battle over turf and who has the right to utilize resources for whomsoever's benefit. The war is also being fought over the truth. What is the truth about human nature, about the human potential? My responsibility to myself, my neighbors, my family, and the human family is to tell the truth. That ain't easy. There are so few truth-speaking traditions in this society in which the myth of Western civilization has claimed the allegiance of so many. We have rarely been encouraged and equipped to appreciate the fact that the truth works, that it releases the spirit, that it is a joyous thing. These are the words of cultural worker, filmmaker, writer, and folklorist Toni Cade Bambara. Shared in a 1983 interview, Bambara's words convey her wild mixture of down-home basic Blackness and a rare, strange, all over the place, complex global consciousness, as described by the feminist writer Bell Hooks. With this in mind, that it's 1983, that she's concerned about issues facing people of color throughout the world, we can hear her declaration that we are at war as an engagement not only what was happening in the US with Reagan-era domestic policies that were negatively impacting down-home Black communities, but also US foreign policies of imperialist and capitalist interventions in and against the developing nations of Grenada, Nicaragua, and Lebanon. If you are beginning to wonder, what in the world does this have to do with folklore? I take a page from my father's book and invite you all to fasten your seatbelt. As some of you know, he would instruct audiences of all ages to do at the beginning of each performance. One of the tools that Toni Cade Bambara believed could tell the truth and release the spirit were Black folktales. In the introductory essay to the edited volumes that cover you're seeing here, gifted to me by my father, In this introductory essay published in 1971, Barbara names this explicitly. She says, while it is important for young folks to read well, to read everything in sight, it is equally important for young folks to learn how to listen, to be proud of our oral tradition, our elders who tell their tales in the kitchen, for they are the truth. And as a devotee of another Black woman genius, some of us may know by the name of Zora Neale Hurston, I am intrigued and delighted by Bambara's nuanced reading of so Zora calls folktales big lies. In her anthology of folktales, Mules and Men, she's capturing all these big lies and fantastical stories that Southern folks tell, taking what she called the spyglass of anthropology back to her own home community. And that work has not only preserved a body of Southern folklore, but has proved really instrumental in the field of what we now call Black studies. So I'm a member of a kind of emergent group of scholars, the Herstonians. And I will say the folklore folks beat us there, right? And anthropologists kind of got to it before Black studies proper, but who believe that Zora Neale Hurston was a really foundational, almost mother figure to the work we do as we try to use all our tools, our writing, our art, our culture, everything to start to understand Black life and survival. I think, did I move too many pieces of paper? I got excited. That's what happened. Oh, off script. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Big lies. So I think it's interesting that Bambara calls these big lies the truth and says that this truth, right, this truth, this play, this language play, this reinvention, this imagination work may very well defend and save the human potential. Slide. Bambara performs this, and this is an image of her here, in a 1985 lecture that's currently archived in the Library of Congress. So you can look it up and listen to it. And she opens with a retelling of a popular children's tale in which a golden-haired burglar child thief with no home training invades and vandalizes the home of a hard-working family of bears. Her telling is peppered with evocative questions that utilize the political lingo associated with the Marxist-Leninist vanguard of the time. At the conclusion of the talk, Bambara asked the audience a series of questions. Is this little girl, who we can presume to be Goldilocks, your hero? Do you think she is an exemplary model of communal behavior? Do you think it is hip to give the library version of the Golden Bandit to little children before we have assumed the responsibility of encouraging and equipping them in a critical manner? And here I want to offer a quick aside that Toni Cade tells this story in an effort to, and she says it at the beginning of the talk, there's a child in the audience and she's trying to give this child something to chew on. She's like, I'm about to get up here and talk about Black film. And so at the beginning, I want to bring in all ages. So for many reasons, this context, beginning with the story, being in an intergenerational crowd, is the perfect and ideal context for this kind of work. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. And your retelling was so perfect. You don't even understand for the argument that I'm about to make. So through my own creative and intellectual practices of restoring, I work to bring this kind of Black feminist political and cultural analysis that Bambara brings to the tales and stories that informed my childhood. My father, Akbar Imhotep, was a student of Toni Cade Bambara and was connected to Atlanta's vibrant Black art scene through her Pomoja writing salons, which were hosted just up the road from where I live and where my father took his last breath in the Vine City neighborhood of West Atlanta. Which is to say, not only is me standing here before you part of my dream and part of my work, but I feel like it's my birthright and an ancestral mandate to do this work. So when my father would tell the wonderful tar baby tale in the yard of the Wren's Nest, surrounded by those beautiful magnolia trees, he would ask young audiences a series of questions. Why can't the tar baby talk would be one of the most interesting to me. So in at least one of the recorded occasions of this, and sadly the video is no longer online, But I started writing about it before it was taken down, so I have the transcript. At least one of the times that this was recorded, he asked, why can't the tar baby talk? And a chorus of white children respond, it doesn't have a voice. It's not even real. It's just tar. It's not alive. To which Imhotep replies, it's real. I just made it here in front of you. So while Miss Josie had to volunteer and physically constructed it for us, so we had no choice but to see it in the backyard, my dad would use gestures and movement to kind of sculpt the figure in midair. I bring my own questions to the text, asking, well, where is the tar baby's voice? What does the tar baby feel? And who is the tar baby to you? So one of the reasons I was so moved by the retelling we just witnessed is because this question of like, so is the tar baby a girl? Is it just a little baby? Is it a representation of the African clay man? Like, it's kind of contentious. But I think when you read that story, and I'm gonna talk about it some more, and the way that Brer Rabbit is like, oh, you sassy as a jaybird. The way Brer Fox dresses it up nice and alluring, like all of it really feminizes the figure. And he's mad and he gets violent because she has the audacity not to respond to him. And that is unfortunately a predicament, a condition that too many women and genderqueer femme people, etc., know too well, right? The penalty, right, for not smiling, for not responding in the way that you're expected to. So my forthcoming academic book, The Tar Baby Principle, thinks about the tar baby as an expression of what I'm calling the Black trickster feminine. So I'm trying to build an idea that while we know Brer Rabbit and we know this like rich history of West African trickster figures, there's a way that the tar baby, in her silence, right, conveys her own kind of trickster technology. And that's what I'm going to talk to you here about today. And in that work, I'm looking specifically at the ways that kind of unruly and challenging Black feminine and folks who did feminized labor like domestic work, etc., played a function during efforts of organized resistance and creative expression in the US South. So I'm thinking about what is the agency of the Black women and Black feminine figures that we often like belittle and dismiss because they're considered to be either cogs in the machine, they're unflattering laborers, etc. They don't fit into the narrative of racial uplift. So I'm looking at them to see like, well, what are the ways that they were like practicing agency and subverting expectations? So as I was preparing this talk, I started to get a little nervous about an assumption that kind of makes my work make sense. Okay. And the assumption that folklore still matters, right, to people who are concerned about Black life and culture and politics. Like, times are so hard and so intense. And I'll admit, especially this weekend for some reason, I've just been confronted with the feeling of like, what is the utility of like theorizing and imagining and trying to offer these undersides. And today, this morning, it makes perfect sense to me. But a couple of days ago, I was like, what am I doing? And it reminds me of a quote that I share with my students often from the British cultural studies scholar Stuart Hall, where he's basically like, you know, against the urgency of people dying in the streets, like, what is cultural studies? And he basically resolves that that is an irresolvable tension. Like, we have to contend with like the moments when it seems like our work isn't like doing the thing or saving the lives. But it doesn't mean that the work's not important, because we have to make sense of what's happening and connect to how it's being represented, et cetera, et cetera. So as I see it, folklore is the domain of the unreliable narrator. Whether traced in speech acts, the stitches of a quilt, written text, or brushstrokes, the folk cultures of Black folk represent a divestment for what we formally think makes life legible. This is the realm of what they call outsider artists and craftspeople. Southern Souls Grown Deep, which is a reference to the folk art collection of Bill is his first name.
Bill Arnett.
Bill Arnett, thank you. Which I feel like is in a warehouse somewhere in the city of Atlanta. But Southern souls grown deep with yards littered with assemblage sculpture. Trickster struts forth as a trans-historical, so throughout time, folkloric archetype that is found nearly in all world cultures. And in this house, as I was saying, we know all about tricksters, namely our dear Brer Rabbit, born and bred in the briar patch. My work's grounding provocation is that the tar baby, too, is a trickster. Black queer performance studies scholar E. Patrick Johnson conveyed in the 2001 article, Queer Studies, or Almost Everything I Know About Queer Studies I Learned from My Grandmother, that the performance strategies of African Americans who labored and struggled under human bondage exemplified this disidentificatory practice, big word, vernacular traditions that emerged among enslaved Africans, including folk tales, spirituals, and the blues, provided the foundation for social and political empowerment. And so what he's saying there when he talks about disidentification is the way that folks who are forced to live within oppressive conditions or conditions that would deny him humanity find ways of making it make sense. Find ways of saying, I connect with this part, but I refuse that part. And so when we look at the way they perform, we might not always get that there's something significant happening, that there's a way that they're using agency to shift what's possible in a given condition or shape, like a plantation, for instance. But they are, in fact, making specific changes to alter their material conditions and the quality of their life. So Johnson describes folktales as a discursive weapon that allowed the enslaved to enact agency in circumstances in which they had no institutional power. He asserts that these forms did not disappear with slavery. They live on in what he calls queer vernacular tools. And he's saying queer because that's how his grandmama used to say queer because she was Southern. Queer. And he's saying that these queer people, gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans people of color, from Bessie Smith to RuPaul, are not simply entertaining. They are utilizing self-fashioning to summon and fortify the agency to resist. And so I asked, what is a trickster figure, if not a figure of being whose every joke, jaunt, twist, and dip overturns the social order in which they are perpetually disempowered? Who better embodies that than the Black feminine figures of our history, our cultures, our lives, our heroines, our grandmothers, our strange queer children? Johnson specifically references tales of what he says is the bottom rail becoming the top riser, which is a metaphor for the slave rising out of slavery. And a lot of the heart of the Brer Rabbit stories and even the Anansi stories, right? The least of these coming out on top. The small little rabbit conquering the fox, the bear, old master, etc. And in addition to the marvelous tar baby stories that come from this collection that Joel Chandler Harris transcribed, I'm looking at the tales of Auntie Minerva Ann, as I invited us to look at earlier, as a signifier of this Black trickster feminine. So there I'm thinking about, well, maybe it's not always explicitly about rising to the top, but maybe there's something subtler that can happen too. Most of the academic books that think about the idea of female trickster figures have focused on white female representations in US and UK popular media, from Jane Austen to certain characters from Sex and the City. And there's a Black scholar, a Black queer studies scholar named L.H. Stalling, who writes about the trickster in Black women's culture. And she's thinking about comedians like Moms Bailey, and LaWanda Page as enactors of these kind of trickster technologies. And for her, this is about, you know, how we come to know and express Black female subjectivity and sexual desire. She uses the idea of the tar baby trope to discuss the ways that Black comedians are using spoken word to disrupt how they're supposed to perform womanhood. And where the word trope denotes a significant figure of speech or idea, the word principle, as I'm using it in my work, carries the weight of a fundamental truth. And with Bambara, I'm invested in the truth. So in establishing the tar baby principle, I endeavored to establish the Black trickster feminine as a foundational organizing principle for subversive Black feminist praxis that has implications for how we understand Black femininity in labor worldwide. Oh, I'm behind a couple. One more. Here's the pictures. Another one. Did they all blank out?
Going. Well, what, I don't, it's not go, it's just being white. There are pictures supposed to be there?
Yeah,
This is one that don't.
you know, technology.
Can't live with it, can't live with it. Yeah. Just get
Let
that.
me see if there's something I can pause.
Would you say trickster technology?
Yes. Right, haha. That's good. That is really good. We are being tricked real good in this.
Just white.
Speaking too much truth. Just,
Is it through an internet connection?
It's on camera, that's what it's on link, so.
yeah.
But it goes back.
Maybe to refresh it?
Yeah, on my thing.
Yeah, but I can get the other ones, but.
Oh, wait.
But that's the old ones, like if I keep going forward, it's just white. Here, I can refresh it.
Yeah, let's see. Well, you know, images are nice, but I guess perhaps not necessary. And I can make available to people who have tickets the slides. I can do that afterwards since this is
I'm sorry, I don't know what to say.
yeah, I don't know either. I think it's beyond us. The tech guys have just made a difference.
Do what your dad did, just keep your hands.
Right, exactly.
You want me to leave it here, is that okay?
Or you can go back to the one that's the picture. Sure. So, okay, it also feels, this is a segue, but since we're dealing with images, I want to say that something that I find interesting about this work is that I'm building a whole, like, analytic theory out of a performance. So this first manifestation of this work was me sitting in my Oakland apartment, reconciling like a tragedy that happened. A young Black woman named Nia Wilson had been murdered by like a random white man on public transit. And I was navigating the kind of grief and fear and anxiety of that. And I decided to write or rewrite a folktale. I was like, maybe this will be good. It will help me process. And I turned to the Tar Baby tale because it was one of the most familiar to me. And when I reread it, I was startled by how violent it was. As I was saying earlier, I was like, oh, like this is intense. And now I'm reading this thing that's supposed to make me feel better, but it's bringing up, it's echoing, right? This thing that I'm trying to make sense of. So from that, I built this performance in which I quite literally covered myself in molasses and pasted words from an essay by another Black feminist scholar named Hortense Fillers, who has this like litany of words that Black women are called that are not our names: earth, mama, brown sugar, etc. I paste these all over myself.
Have you
Wow.
got a picture of that? You did?
There's like a still from it, but
Oh.
so I do that, and then as I'm doing that, my retelling of the Tar Baby tale is playing, and I'm telling the story from the Tar Baby's perspective. So in the retelling, which last time I gave a version of this paper, I read an excerpt of it, but it's like, what if we imagine that morning Brer Fox woke up and was visited by a muse, and that muse guided him in the shaping of this figure? What if we imagine that this was a being who had gotten celestial permission or earthly permission from her mother, from her maker, to come take form and to see what life was like on the earth? And that figure don't say nothing because she has nothing to say, right? As she experiences this encounter. And then it goes on to imagine what survival and return might look like for her. So that it's interesting to me, even though I did it, but I still find it interesting that like performance was the kernel of this whole bigger question that I've now dedicated a huge swath of my life to. So bringing us back in here in this room, in this house, I want to talk about Miss Chloe and Auntie Minerva Ann. So on the slide that was here in theory, I had a series of pictures that Jim actually had found of these depictions of Auntie Minerva Ann. And I'm gonna read again so I stay where I'm going, even though I do really like so for those of you who have not gotten to tour this house and meet Chloe Henderson, she was one of the domestic workers who stewarded these grounds along with several members of her family. A composite of Mrs. Henderson, her sisters, and other domestic workers working in the West End were likely the template for Auntie Minerva Ann. This is interesting to me because in July of 1881, the year that Harris anthologized and published the first Uncle Remus collection, Uncle Remus, His Songs and His Sayings, and moved into this house. So the very year he moved into this house, a Black woman-led coalition of domestic workers, laundresses, formed the Washing Society and organized a successful general strike for better working conditions and a universal pay rate. Not only did this strike achieve its aims that year, it inspired service industry workers across the city to organize. So just 2 decades after the abolition of slavery, these washing Amazons, as some journalists had referred to them, effectively shifted the material conditions of what was then Black women's most common profession. A few months prior, in April of 1881, Sophia B. Packard and Harriet E. Giles founded the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary in the basement of the original Friendship Baptist Church. I share these historical markers to paint a picture of the world Harris was living and writing in. Just as he conjured up Uncle Remus from his adolescent experiences at the feet of Old Harvard and George Terrell Harris, who's back here behind the screen. Just as he fashioned Uncle Remus from George Terrell Harris, Auntie Minerva Ann was this imprint of a new kind of post-emancipation Black woman worker whose fierce wit refused to bend to the oppressive forces of racial capitalism. What makes Auntie Minerva Ann and the Washing Amazons of 1881 tar babies is the way they performed with refusal from within the domestic sphere, from the rhetorical and material bottom of the social and economic hierarchy. While their trickster strategies were not about rising to the top, they were about exploiting the dependency that the white world had on their labors to effectively shift the way they were treated and improve their quality of life in small but significant measures. Controversially, I argue that these domestic tar babies embodied a more revolutionary Black femininity than that of the upwardly mobile Black ingenues being trained in reading, writing, and Christian mores just up the road. I ran into an unexpected example of the tar baby principle at work in my engagements with the advisory committee, currently working to support Jim's effort to rewrite the tour script. And I think it was set off by Jim mentioning the book, The Life and Letters of Joel Chandler Harris, which was published by Harris's daughter, Julia, in 1919. Daughter-in-law, thank you. So as I was skimming through that book looking for mentions of Chloe, honestly, I stumbled across Harris making this glowing endorsement of the work of someone named Howard Whedon. Born in Huntsville, Alabama in 1846, Whedon's land-owning family was displaced by the Civil War. However, instead of adopting a posture of resentment for the newly freed Blacks, as many Southern whites were deeming responsible for the fact that they had lost their property and their status, Whedon developed what we could consider a sympathetic investment in the portrayals of Black folks who now move through her world with conditional freedom. Mm-hmm. So Harris wrote a glowing introduction of Whedon's 1998 collection of portraits and poems, which was called Bandana Ballads. And I wanted to introduce you to one of the human characters profiled in that volume as another example of the ways Black women in the late 19th century were beginning to articulate these refusals of stereotypical representation. So I wanted us to read it together. I was gonna get a volunteer and everything, but since it's not here, I shall read it to you from my phone. And so what I find interesting about Howard Whedon, first, she, Maria Howard Whedon, published with this pseudonym. Like, I don't think it was a secret that she was Maria Howard Whedon, but in the public record on her book, she went by Howard Whedon, which initially confused me, but I see it as her own kind of trickster feminine move, right? Navigating the publishing conditions of the time. So in this, she would do these interviews. Oh, we got
Progress, but why is it making 4?
that's probably your projector. It's like, and now it's creative. It's like a collage.
Yeah.
Like I can't read it, but it's a quilt. Yes.
Why?
So more time.
And I can still read it, but it's cool that you got at least a flash. Oh, yeah. See, Judy wanted to be seen.
Right.
Okay. So what Howard Whedon would do was she would interview or have conversations with these people who were sitting for portraits. So she started drawing and writing poems about garden and flowers and her mother and stuff like that. And then after going to one of those World's Fairs and seeing all the like really heinous depictions of Black folks, she took on this project of crafting an alternative representation, which is really interesting. And it's not without complication, you know, like her and Harris were invested in this idea that like, you know, people are saying all this wild and wildly racist stuff about Black people, but the Black people we knew were like they were like upstanding citizens and so kind and had character and like you know, they had this really romanticized idea of the lives and interior realities of the people who they had encountered, but they were intentionally working to disrupt the kind of racist depictions that were more popular at the time. So this is one of the many poems in the Bandana Ballads volume. Is there anybody who can see the screen who'd like to read Aunt Judy and the Painter for us?
Aunt Judy and the Painter. I can't allow my picture took the way you wants to draw, a leaving off my freedom look for fashions for the war. You'd have my dress, you say, be plain of that dull, quiet blue that caught from years of sun and rain its tender faded hue, and on my head a turban red worn with a stately grace, to harmonize, I think you said, with my rich, dark brown face. No, Lord, my picture can't be caught by man with no sich manners. That's exactly why the war was fought, to end them same bandanas.
So thank you, right? So, okay, before I tell you what I hear, are there any like thoughts or reflections? Like, what do you hear in Aunt Judy's dialogue with the painter as articulated by the painter?
I've been through stuff that you can't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
The word refusal comes up. You were talking about that, and just even in the first 3 words of the poem, you hear that refuse, like to allow.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like the painter is projecting onto her in the act of painting, and she's saying,
Right. And those are the things I hear too. And interestingly, right, when we see the portrait, we see that she is wearing a headscarf, right? It's black and white, so we don't know the colors, etc. But there's a way that I'm honestly surprised that this writer that Howard Whedon would publish this like really frank encounter between herself and this woman who's saying plainly, like, this war was fought, my freedom was won, so I don't have to look like that no more. I don't have to dress like that. I don't want my picture taken that way. And I thought this was like a pretty rare for the time articulation. One project in general is kind of this creative ethnography where somebody's doing interviews and changing them into poems. And then it's also like she's publishing a poem of her ideals, her projections being challenged.
And I hear I also hear that my picture can't be caught. Not it, also the refusal of I refuse to take a picture in this way. I have my freedom, but also the whole of me can't be captured in these dimensions of a photograph. I'm so much more than this faded blue, this red. Like I'm more,
Right. That depiction would not, and I guess was never, right, a full depiction of who I am. So I'm really excited to continue to like read and work with this poem as a way of thinking about the kind of, again, like what I'm calling tar baby strategies of these Black women domestic workers.
Was Aunt Judy a real person or is she a fictional
She
creation?
was a real person, but I have discovered that there was like an idea, like Aunt Judy was also similar to Uncle Remus as a way that people referred to these older Black women, former domestic workers. But this was a real person who I presume's name may have been Aunt Judy, or maybe that was Whedon herself translating this person into the kind of popular culture.
Who did the illustration? Who actually?
Howard Whedon.
She did. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then the other thing that I hear is like you, the painter, in your experience of the world and all of that, like you can't capture me anyway. Because you don't have a fucking clue, right? You're coming from where you're coming from. You can see me, but you can't know me. You can't know me, yeah.
Right.
That's kind of what I hear.
She's challenging the very project, right?
Yeah.
And she's challenging, like in the meta sense, like the conditions of her life in this post-war moment, right? It's phenomenal to me, and I'm so grateful to have found it. And there are other, like I was reading recently, a poem by a Black woman poet, Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, called Aunt Chloe's Politics, that similarly depicts a kind of like progressive, politically resistant or culturally resistant aunt figure. So I'm excited to keep thinking with them together. I'll also lift up, there's a playwright, and I will get her full name, but she, Atlanta-based journalist, now playwright, wrote a play called The Wash about the Washington
Yeah,
Society.
yeah, we saw that.
Kalandra Smith, yes, fabulous. So that's another thing that I'm writing about in my book. Like I have these like content chapters, and then I have these little like interludes that I'm calling base stitches throughout that are readings of art and performances. So I'm excited to write about that.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what your take is on the expressions about the different colors, like the faded hue and the red and blue shows.
That's a good question. I mean, I will say that I haven't like fully like gotten into my analysis, but I do find it interesting that, you know, the red bandana is such a signifier for like the Aunt Jemima mammy stereotype. So I find that really interesting. And like there's actually a lot of recent work about blue, right? As part of that, I also think about indigo, but I also think about her mention that it's faded and worn. So like just this evidence of the work that she's done, of the way that it's had to be washed, that she doesn't have many pieces. I also think there's an interesting like red and blue kind of Americana layer there that is interesting to parse through, but that's a really good question. Yeah.
The thing about the colors too is that there's such blatant condescension. You'd have my dress be plain, that dull, quiet blue, you know. And yes, the turban is worn with a stately grace in order to harmonize with, you know, just.
And we can imagine, like, I think it's clear that those are the words that Whedon used to make the request of the sitter. So that's another reason why this is interesting to me, because she's pointing out the condescension of her projection and of her request. And I was telling this story to one of my elders, Mama Bethany, and I was just talking about how moved I was by this poem and by this interaction. And Mama Bethany pointed out that the fact that the volume is called Bandana Blues, and now I'm thinking about color, shows the significance of this exchange to the whole project, which adds a really interesting layer of like, how did this interaction shift the ways that we didn't conceptualize this reparative work she was doing, trying to like represent a more glorified image of the free Black people. So thank you for that question. Like y'all are truly like pointing me towards like new corners of analysis. I knew, see, I said interactive reading of Anjali, and I knew that was gonna be good. So as I was saying, I wrote a version of the Tar Baby story, and that is featured in my poetry collection, Gossipin', which deals with a lot of story and tale and myth, particularly about family and healing across generations.
What
And
a cover.
right, that's the work of an artist named Alison Sarr. And I loved it. Have a good rest of your day. Oh, have a good trip to the bathroom. I like the blue. I think of like indigo alongside cotton as like one of the staple crops grown in the South. I also think about like the figure of Topsy. Again, like I'm really interested in how these like maligned representations of Black femininity can be reimagined, particularly by Black women artists. So that was even at play in crafting this poetry book, which came out in 2022. I've already told you all about the folk tale, but this was a moment where I was going to talk about it some more. Next. So this is a lot to look at, but please look at it. This is a theory map that I made with a collaborator of mine named Miyuki Baker. And it's just an attempt to kind of represent some of the core themes and questions of my work. So in the folktale that I've retold and in my academic analysis of it, I argue that the way that the Tar Baby figure is dressed up and adorned mark it as Black and feminine. She is sassy as a jaybird, in the words of Brer Rabbit. And part of what provokes Brer Rabbit's violent engagement with her body is her silence. So the encounter is underwritten by gendered expectations. Brer Rabbit's attack is meant to teach her, as he says, the spectable way to speak to a fellow like him. And as I was saying earlier, this reading I'm performing is eerily reminiscent of the violence that continues to plague women, gender expansive, queer and trans people who are often targeted for simply existing and daring to mind their own business. Toni Morrison wrote a book called Tar Baby, published in the 80s. I didn't put the year here, but it offered, 1981. It offers yet another reclamation of the Tar Baby as a gendered Black subject. And in an interview discussing her inspiration for the novel, she said, I use that old story because despite its funny, happy ending, we know Brer Rabbit tricks the fox and gets sent on back to the Briar Patch, which is where he's from. Despite that happy ending, Toni Morrison says, the tale used to frighten me. The story has a tar baby in it, which is used by a white man to catch a rabbit. Tar baby is also a name, like nigger, that white people call Black children, Black girls, as I recall. Tar seemed to me to be an odd thing to be in a Western story. And I found that there is a tar lady in African mythology. I started thinking about tar. At one time, a tar pit was a holy place, at least an important place, because tar was used to build things. It came naturally out the earth. It held together things like Moses' little boat and the pyramids. For me, the tar baby came to mean the Black woman who can hold things together. The story was a point of departure to history and prophecy. That's what I mean by dusting off the myth, looking closely at it to see what it might conceal. Here, as it's explicated by L.H. Stallings, the tar baby becomes an active being, less constructed by other individuals or beings, but still caught in between roles and representation in one's own self. This exemplifies the queer aesthetics and rhetorical strategies that enliven the work of Black feminine figures that my project tends to. Turning toward and sticking to the Black folkloric figure of the tar baby. The tar baby principle takes seriously Zora Neale Hurston's, in Their Eyes Were Watching God, she has the grandmother tell Janie that the nigger woman is the mule of the world. So my work is taking that seriously and imagining how contemporary Southern Black artists personify and challenge this association through invocations of the Black trickster feminine. I already told you the sad origin story of my retelling, encountering grief, encountering violence. But as I see it, the tar baby is not fully defined by the violence she is subjected to. If we attune ourselves to the roles played by the Black feminine figure in the landscape of the critter community that we call life, we find ground to explore the tar baby's unique expression of agency. What scholar activist Angela Davis, in her reading of Black women who lived and sang the blues, has called veiled protest. Black study practitioner and philosopher Fred Moten has described what I'm trying to get at as the resistance of the object. Reading, a way to understand Black life, in the screams of jazz vocalist Abby Lincoln, which carried the echo of Frederick Douglass's Aunt Hester. So in this moment, the scholar Fred Moten is saying that on the Max Roach album, Prayer, Protest, and another word, Freedom Now, sweet. Anyway, on that album, which is incredible, there's a record where Abby Lincoln is like screaming in her like embodiment of the transatlantic slave trade. And for Moten, that scream carries the resonance of Aunt Hester's scream. And Aunt Hester is Frederick Douglass's aunt, and in his narrative, he talks about how hearing her screaming as she was being harmed by the slave master is what spurred his like commitment to running away. So Moten is saying that like the freedom that Black people have been able to create emanate from the war cries of Black feminine figures who are surviving that racialized and gendered violence. This is the tar baby principle. The way the sticky matter of Black femininity is at once captive and captivating to spectators across lines of race and gender. Irresistible and destructive, these tar baby trickster sensibilities are both bait and switch. They attract, they disgust, they stain, they cleanse. To close my remarks, I want to turn to the words of Alice Walker, Georgia-born literary high priestess and a harsh critic of Joel Chandler Harris. And this is from the 1974 essay In Search of Our Mother's Garden, where Walker turns to Black folklore to expound upon all the things projected onto the figure of the Black woman. She writes, Black women are called, in the folklore that so aptly defines one's status in society, the mule of the world, because we have been handed the burdens that everyone else refused to carry. We have been called, where is it at? We have also been called matriarchs, superwomen, mean and evil bitches, not to mention castrators and Sapphire's mama. When we have pleaded for understanding, our character has been distorted. When we have asked for simple caring, we have been handed empty and inspirational appellations, like Black Queen, etc. Then stuck in the farthest corner. When we have asked for love, we have been given children. In short, even our plainer gifts, our labors of fidelity and love, have been knocked down our throats. To be an artist and a Black woman, even today, lowers our status in many respects, rather than raises it. And yet, artists we will be. It is my prayer that the tar baby principle waters the roots of our foremothers' gardens, so that us folks, marked by Blackness and femininity, and the generations that come after us, may rest, may gossip, may lie and tell the truth under the shade tree of their bounty. Thank you. So much, especially for like participating in the reading of the poem. That was really generative. And I'm grateful. And as I was saying, like, I have to find a way to always read with a storyteller because that was so perfect. Or I guess with someone, I don't know.
You really want us to bring that tar baby up from the break?
I
What she's talking about is there's a tar baby figure that we think was part of the diorama. Yeah, and it's the thing on the right. And we think it was part of the diorama that was in the lobby of the Fox Theater when Song of the South premiered in November of 1946. We're not 100% sure, but we think.
And comparing to those figures up on the top of that bookshelf, right?
These would have been some of the same figures. And it was part of that display. And it used to be routinely put in here when people were doing storytelling. And then we started, well, several successions of people at the Renaissance started thinking, you know, that needs a lot of context. Maybe we should put that away and wait for the context. So, because it, as you know, it's charged. And so that's what we're talking about.
And I think learning, because I've been swimming in these waters for some time, but then when I heard you say that, I was like, where is it? He was like, it's in the basement because it's so controversial. And then he was saying how the storytellers, some storytellers have asked for it back, but then other people are saying it's complicated. And I was like, that is it. Like, that's literally the type of like contention I'm talking about, how these figures like.
What we had talked about is having some sort of a small exhibition about the most famous of the stories, the tar baby stories. And that's when we should bring it back because but you have to have somebody who actually can explain the context of it. If you just put it out there without somebody can explain it, some people are going to be offended. For sure.
Oh, too bad.
It's true.
I feel equipped and inspired probably from the spirit of the tar baby speaking to me from the basement.
We should unlock the basement door and have an expedition to go to.
You build her a little heart.
Yes. I just have to say thank you so much to the performers, to Dr. Ra Malika. I am filled and I'm moved and I felt like this is so profound and it's going to be sticking with me. And I have nothing profound to say other than I can't stop thinking about how because of this trickster feminine figure, the Brer rabbit will always be stained with that tar. You know, I know that there's no afterlife to this story, but I'm thinking about how his fur must have been matted and patched up and he's scarred psychically, you know. You know what I'm saying? But I'm like, what does it mean to stain? Even in the midst or in the aftermath of that harm, you know? That's it.
I've never understood how the briars would actually get all that tar off.
I want to say one thing. In all the years of telling the story of the tar baby, I mean, whoever knew it could be so profound? I mean, you know, we just, as kids and as adults, we just enjoyed the story. Who knew about all the other stuff that's coming out of it now? That's amazing.
But I love your comment about, you know, his fur being matted and suffering from her, but then think about that. She is also probably still having some bits of him.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, it's the tangle.
Yeah, the tangle. They've both been
changed.
Yeah. And you know, I'm certainly not the first, nor will I be the last to make this argument about the ways that our like social, cultural, and political entanglement with Black femininity marks us and is marked by us, right? And you know, in my dissertation, I was very cheekily like, you know, I use the language like people marked by Blackness and femininity, but the truth is that's literally every human being ever. Like I'm talking specifically about Black folks, but I'm also talking about everyone. And I think it's because of that, right? Octavia Butler says, all that you touch, you change, all that you change changes you, right? And I think that does come from like a kind of like Black feminine orientation to understanding the world. So like all of that is in this thing. And I just have to thank y'all so much because I was really worried recently. I was like, what am I doing? Like I'm about to write a book about this. Like, what am I doing here? And this is such like beautiful affirmation, even just like your eyes and your presence and like you being in this room feels really good. Yeah.
I just feel like this is one of the most important conversations that we can have in the whole world. And so the fact that you're like in there taking it apart and saying, okay, this is what we've got, I appreciate it. So thank you.
I'm just wondering in your book that you're working on if how heavily you're incorporating like popular music characters in there, because I'm sitting here and you're talking about the feminine trickster, you know, and she's subverting other people's expectations, and I'm like picturing in my mind, I'm picturing Josie Baker, right? Or I'm picturing, you know, there are certain modern artists, and I'm just wondering because I feel like they're a big voice out there in the artistic community doing that.
Yeah.
Saying, screw you, I'm gonna go my direction. I'm gonna sing country music if you want. You
Yeah.
you know, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
no, I definitely look at pop culture figures. I will say I have like this specific focus on like folks from and in the US South.
Oh, okay.
And it's not necessarily bracketed by a time period, but like I can say I write about there's an artist named Vanessa German who makes these like really profound sculptural figures, like sometimes using crystals and found objects, but she has a series of dolls that she calls Tar Baby, and they're like power figures for her. I write about The Play by Kalundra Smith, The Wash. I write about a New Orleans-based artist and mentor of mine, Kaila Mumbabero, who does these like Black surrealist paintings and performances. And I write about my own work as a performance artist. And I feel like other things kind of snake their way into there, but the contemporary is definitely in the room. And interestingly, as I hear myself talk, I'm like, I guess I don't really think about music, but I will say that when I'm writing about these glorious aunts and matriarchs, when I write about blues women who show up a little bit, that's kind of where I get the music piece in there.
I have a comment.
Oh.
So, based on your presentation, I'm a little confused, okay? So, based on, as a storyteller, I have never referred to the tar baby as being a female. So, are you saying that there's some place in the book where as the tar baby is a female?
I do think that in the Joel Chandler Harris iteration, the tar baby is a girl. But that's like literally there's so many different ones. So some I was just looking in the bookstore, they have the Julius Lester interpretations and it's not explicit. There's like, but then there's Virginia Hamilton who has a book called Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby Girl. So like it's not settled at all. My dad disagreed with me. But I do think, and now I can point to your research. Now I got you in my corner.
The reason I am saying that to you is because, you know, Akbar was my mentor, and every time he took time to present the tar baby, it was never a female. It was always a male image. And so I'm trying to really correct myself in my own brain. If you can give me reason to rhyme that the tar baby is a female, then maybe I can start telling the story from that perspective, or do I go back to Akbar Imhotep, who has been telling this story for years that the tar baby was not a female? I'm still a little.
Well, yeah, I would say for my dad, it was an itty bitty baby, an itty bitty person. So it didn't have a gender, right? Which to me is also interesting to think about. genderless being, right? But what my argument is the fact that like it is, whether it's an itty bitty baby or a baby girl, it is intentionally dressed up to attract Brer Rabbit. And I think that that's like a marking of femininity. That's my argument. So I can't tell you how to tell the story, right? And I think that there's merit to every way it's told. But my kind of provocative argument is that there's no way around the fact that gender and femininity play some kind of role in this encounter. Because it, like, without it, like, how do you justify Brer Rabbit attacking this thing, you know?
Interesting. Why would he be interested?
Well, or Brer Rabbit's gay. I mean, like either way, you're going in a direction.
Oh, that's another program.
Well, that comment, see, the way I've heard the story told by your father for years, it's not because the tribe baby is a female, it's just an object in Brer Rabbit's path that he wants to really address. He is known for anybody being in his territory. He's asking questions. Who are you? Why are you here? And so that's why I'm a little confused.
Yeah, I mean,
about that altogether.
It's a provocation, you know. So I think that like there are reasons why it's not told this way. I mean, I think it's more child friendly to not tell it that, to not make it explain.
I just want to say, but the way I arrived at that, it had nothing to do with history. The way I read it has nothing to do with that. It came about. Akbar, he hated you dressing the turban like that. But this is how it came about. I mean, I never even thought about the merits. I was telling stories at a school, and I pulled a child up. They said, "Let me help you tell the story." So I pulled him up, and it was a boy, and I just used him as a toy baby. I didn't dress him in any way. I just used him as a toy baby. And then, after telling it so many times, one little girl said, "Dress him like a girl. Dress him like a girl." That's how I started. I didn't know anything about the merits. It was just my way of
Common exaggeration.
And I think it like, and I think that works. You know, I think that like, because again, the idea coming from the way I reimagine the folktale just with my creative mind is like, what if something bigger than us inspires our imagination, right? Like, what if something like beyond like is able to communicate to how we understand these stories, how we understand these figures. So I'm not like, for me, it's not necessarily about like justifying, like finding the like absolute truth of like how the story is written. Though I'm like, sassy as a jaybird feels like a specific kind of, you know, comment. But I do think that it's, like I said, it's not necessarily about wrong or right for me, but I find this story very interesting. We're gonna have to do an oral history. It's just a perfect example.
Well, to me, this is the joy of the language of storytelling, right? Is everybody interprets in their own way. We spend a lot of time at the Shakespeare Tavern, and that's one of my favorite things about Shakespeare is there are so many different ways that you can hear it. Like the first time I heard Taming of the Shrew, I had never seen the play before, and we went to the Stratford Festival. At the end, I'm listening to the language, and what I saw in my head is she's sticking a shiv in him. I thought Kate like taking him down. Now it's my interpretation of the language, and frankly, I'm a violent person, so I'm just saying that's the thing that's so beautiful is you might hear one thing, you might hear something else, and everybody interpret it and tell it, you know, what's resonating with them.
Yeah.
That's the glorious part of it. And I love that you've seen this feminine side in this when maybe other people didn't, you know, quite see it that way.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you said that because it reminds me like the first time I wrote, so like the performance existed. And then I wrote, there was one of my mentors who also supported the exhibit in the back, Paulette Richards, is a puppeteer. And she curated this living objects puppetry exhibit at the Ballard Institute for Puppetry at UConn. And so I was invited to go there to represent or like speak alongside my dad's puppets. And when I was writing about it, I was like, you know, being a little dark-skinned Black girl child looking up at that gummy tar baby thing, like there was an identification that I can't explain. But like that's why I liked it so much. That's why I come in here looking for it. Like I just really was drawn to it. And that is where my like theory brain comes from. Like it comes from that level of just like when I saw it, I felt this. And this is how I'm making sense of that.
Well, you're right about that sassy as a jaybird sort of leads you down certain avenues, doesn't it?
Well, and also when the performer said, you know, it increasingly got darker. Oh, you're not gonna talk to me? Oh, I'm gonna teach you some manners. As a little girl who comes into her sexuality, we have all encountered a man who said, oh, you didn't have good house training? You're not gonna talk to me? We know that threat in a very specific way, right? So there's identification in that, absolutely.
There's somebody talking about reporters who don't smile enough.
Right, right.
I just,
Yeah.
Yes.
Where is the best place for us to follow your developing work?
Oh,
And what are the best ways that we can support you?
that's a great question. I do have a website. You know, I can actually think about this and then we could send like a little follow-up.
If you tell me what you want to say, I'll send it to everybody.
Yeah, because there's I do have a website. I do like have I try to write some Substack blog, like some public facing things, especially as I try to like really get in and like give this work some attention. I also have like the poetry book that I can like send people a link to purchase.
And a video of your performance covered in
that does exist.
That's
That does exist in the
I
world.
think that's what we'd really see.
Which is also really interesting to me. Like y'all don't even understand how much like art is imitating life, is imitating theory in this moment. Exactly. I'm so glad to see it recorded. But thank you for that. And I will work with Rebecca to send out some like resources and links. But thank you so much.
will we get the full recording of this as well?
Yeah, I'll put a link to that since we're already sending out a nice communication. I'm already thinking we also have a new book we need to stop.
I was gonna say,
I will be part of your book cover when you're.
Yeah, thank you for
There's
we said hi. She might need a new frame. She might want like a nice gold frame.
Represented.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please feel free to enjoy the exhibit she was mentioning, some coffee and tea and.
Oh, yeah.
If you would like to, if you're not artistic,